that doesn't teach you the importance of goal setting, I don't know what does.
And then when I stepped into the business world, I realized the authentic self was so powerful to build a brand.
I have a tendency to ruminate on something, so then I'll just recycle it in my head over and over and over.
I love being coached by men. I don't know if it's just because of like the dance world and the fitness side of things, all my coaches were men.
Okay, friends, today we have Tamra, Myra in the house. Hello, hello. How are you, girl?
All the way from Australia. So I'm really, really good. I won't put the strong, thick accent on for your listeners.
I love it. I love it. Okay, so everybody who's listening, Tamara and I met at a mastermind in LA. Okay, she is unbelievable, doing crazy things in Australia, has a top 10 podcast, is a like business mentor, keynote speaker, all the happy things. And when we met, I'm like, you need to be on the podcast. You have too many cool things to share.
That was such a beautiful intro, my love. Thank you. And likewise, I felt the same way. And I think it's great for the listeners to see, connecting the dots and how when you meet someone in a different country, what that can bring for you, right?
Yes. And I have an affinity for Australia because one of my mountains was there. So I will always have a soft spot there for my own pursuits. But okay, so you got into this whole thing from kind of a dance / fitness angle, right? So like give us the evolution of younger you till today.
I love this. I was thinking about this the other day because I'm putting together like connecting the dots from where you were to where you are now. And yeah, my background was, well, just a bit of background as well. I was born in Germany. My mum's from Brazil. So I'm half German, half Brazilian. And she was told by the doctors that I was a quite hyperactive kid. So dancing, ballet was what kind of kept me disciplined and structured as well. But we moved to Australia when I was 4. My dad was in the military in Germany. And for us growing up, life was quite, I'm going to say, quite turbulent. So, dancing was almost like my stage of expressing myself when I was never able to express with what was going on behind the scenes. And a typical, Brazilian mum would tell me, don't show people what you're going through, stay quiet. And I don't know if that's relatable to the listeners, but it was just the way dancing was the way that I was able to just move through what was going on. But yeah, I became a professional dancer. I went to a top agency here in Australia. It was called Grey Boy. And I actually ended up having a panic attack at a Snow White musical, which then taught me to then veer into sort of working through some physical and internal things that were going on, which is why I stepped into the fitness world here in Australia. And it's quite big here, the bodybuilding community. And for the first time, I was told that my shape was made for the stage, whereas in dance world, I had to always go against my genetics and the muscles that I had from my genetics of my mum and my dad. So yeah, I became a professional athlete as a WBFF pro. And then through that, just before I stepped on stage, I was diagnosed with complex post-traumatic stress. And that was my new sort of pinnacle moment where I then stepped into the personal development world, working through some holistic approaches to heal all the events that happened growing up. And I found my love for wanting to help women build empires because growing up, we didn't have much. And, at 12 years old, I was homeless on the street. So it was almost like my pain became my purpose. And so now I've just been so passionate about helping women build their empires in the online space as coaches as well. And so that's the connecting the dots from being a professional dancer, professional actor to now a business mentor.
Wow. Talk to me about being homeless as a child. Were you in Germany at that time? What brought you to Australia?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I only found out recently by my mum. My dad was actually a fugitive, so he ran away from Germany to Australia. And when I was young, I didn't understand that. Right. And so we moved to Australia when I was 4. So at 12 was when I remember really specifically, my mum came home with myself and my little brother. We tried to open up the house and it was locked out. And I don't know if this is something that happens in America, but if you don't pay rent, which is, living in your home for a couple of years, they kick you out. And so that's what happened to my dad. My dad developed a really severe, from very, 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 very young, gambling addiction. So we were always
Mm,
in and out of homes, in and out of different schools. So that was a pretty big moment because I've never seen my mum show emotions other than like be happy, be positive, you know? So it
yeah.
was really intense. It was scary. We lived in caravan parks, and I think that's why the perseverance is there for me, the drive to keep going. I know you speak a lot about that moment in time where you lose everything or you could lose everything. And I think that was just a reminder where I felt for the first time at 12 that I lost everything. So yeah, it was pretty severe.
Wow. Wow. Where's most of your family located now?
Yeah, my mum's here. I don't speak
Okay.
to my father anymore. So yeah, and
Okay.
I've got a little brother. We've got a really small family.
Yeah. 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 Okay. So what about grandmas and like long-term relatives removed?
Yeah, yeah. So more on my mum's side in Brazil. So we've got
Okay.
a couple of cousins and grandparents there. Don't speak to anyone from my father's side.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Wow. How old were you
yeah.
when you moved to Australia?
Four.
4.
So picture
Wow.
this as well. English was my third language because mum spoke to me in German and Portuguese, and
Okay.
yeah, English was third.
Wow. Can you keep up? Do you keep up on all of them, even though you don't use the other ones as often?
I really try to with the German, Portuguese, and it really kills me because I think I've got more of my mum's Brazilian nature, the fiery, passionate, crazy, but also, you know, kind-hearted. But no, the German side's what I still keep the language.
Oh my goodness. Do you just have more opportunities to use it, maybe, right?
Yeah, and I think that's a big thing. You know, if I was ever to travel to Europe as well, I still have a German passport. I definitely feel like that would be an advantage. But I do
Yeah.
feel one day I'd definitely love to go to Brazil again and just reconnect with the heritage and stuff. Have you been?
I've not been to Brazil. I've been to quite a few countries in South America, but not yet Brazil. It's on the list. It's definitely on the list. Um,
You would love it.
okay, so when you, how was it being a dancer? Because you said this,
Mm,
and you didn't quite have the body for it, and then you got into um, bodybuilding, and they're like, you're a
mm,
natural, like your genetics are made for this. Was it
mm.
ever hard being in dance before when you just felt like, did people tell you you didn't have the body for it? Did you ever feel like you didn't have the body for it? How would you
Yeah,
process that?
yeah, it's interesting. I think about like little things that I remember when I was even like 5. You know, my ballet teacher would walk up to me, pinch my stomach, and like tell me to always, you know, pull up and suck in, which, yes, is really good for posture and stuff. But, you know, things were developed when I was young with disorderly eating as well, because, you know, as a
Oh,
dancer, you're constantly being looked at and judged. You know, you go to an audition, you know, everything's about, you know, how you perform, your talents, your looks, your body. So
yep,
I even remember when I went to full time dancing, it was funny. I'd have I never really used to smoke, but it was known as like the coffee and cigarette diet back in Australia. And, you know, we would carb up at the local, like it's called Aldi. It's like a grocery store here where we would like have heaps of lollies to get energy. Then we'd go back to dance and like not eat. And it sounds crazy to hear that because, you know, a lot of the times, you know, when you do also then audition for agencies here, they would say, you know, do more excessive cardio, you know, do more Pilates and that kind of stuff, like lengthen your limbs. And I was like, I'm doing all the things. So there was a lot of excessive training with that as well. And it came a little bit normal because even thinking back to growing up, you know, I was put into dancing from 3. And then after school, I'd be dancing from 3 till 7 p.m. So I was quite structured and masculine in everything that I did. So it was
yeah.
always something that was indented in me from such a young age. To hear that, you know, my physique suited bodybuilding, I was like, oh, give me all the food.
Oh, yeah, right, right, right.
Yeah.
Do you ever like, have you, I mean, obviously you work, so then how did you learn? Because stage work is pretty vulnerable, right?
Which
Like
one
getting
for?
up on the stage and doing performing to like show you, like that is vulnerability at its finest.
Yeah, and that's I feel the most connected with as well. And I mean, there's the stage of when you're an actor dancer, it's almost like a mask, and then when you're on a stage as a bodybuilder, you know, you're showing the world, your hard work.
Yeah.
And there's a moment where you're just so like, I get to be here in this moment. I've worked 20 weeks, sometimes years, just to be on that stage. And I remember the year I won
Mhm.
was 54 girls on stage, and it was insane. I was on that stage for like an hour. I remember my calves were so sore, and I was just like, but you're just your adrenaline's there. Like you forget about all the hard work, you forget about the pain, the cries, and it's just a really magical moment. And you're right, it's so vulnerable. You could probably relate with everything you've gone through too.
Yeah. When you do the bodybuilding, do you do those like 6 week cutting where you like are only eating that you're not doing the carbs and all that kind of stuff because that allows your muscles to look as good as possible? Is that part of that?
Yeah, it's interesting because every comp, because I competed from 2014, so I think I did like 8 to 10 shows before, like all up, and every prep, we call it, was different. So I think the first one was
Okay.
like very, very bad because I didn't know what I was sort of getting myself into. So it was very, I mean, look, bodybuilding isn't a healthy sport, it's not sustainable, right?
Right,
But
right. Of course
yeah,
not.
we went through building phases, carb loading, carb depletion, carb cycling, so many different like variables depending on like how you look, how full you are, like depending on like what the judges want, the feedback as well. But yeah, I think the very last show was probably the healthiest, if we say,
Okay. Yeah.
because I think I only depleted the carbs 2 weeks out from
Oh wow.
memory.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So
Okay.
if done properly with the right experts, it should be done in a way where it is approachable, that it is healthy enough. So you're not ruining your hormones, your mental
Right.
health, all of that kind of stuff. So yeah.
Right. Are they training you on mental health and not just the physical aspect, or is that something that's on your own?
Yeah, on your own. And I think because of what I was explaining before, I remember the last show I did, second last show, sorry, there was nothing implemented with the mindset work, which is why I then decided to do that on myself. But I think a lot of coaches now are realizing so many women do bodybuilding comps to either fill a void, or lose weight that way because they think that's the only way to lose weight, and they're not incorporating like the mindset work with it. And a lot of women come out of it, they call it comp post comp blues, where you
Yeah.
leave or you finish up your show and you're like, well, what do I do next? And a lot of
Right.
women go through a lot of like soul searching because they don't know who they are without competition.
Yeah, I mean that's same with mountaineering, right? So you climb this mountain, or you have this world record that you're chasing, and then you get the world record, and you're like, now what? Like I was so much of my
Mm,
identity was wrapped up in the pursuit, and like you knew what to do when you trained, you knew how to eat, like everything was working towards that goal, and that
yeah.
goal's achieved, and then you're like, wow, there's a like if that doesn't teach you the importance of goal setting, I don't know what does, because you go to the gym after you climb a mountain and you're like, oh, I can do whatever I want. I don't even know what I'm supposed to do. I'm just going to go home. It's
I,
crazy.
I I get it. And sometimes it's like, well, what's the next thing that I want to do when it comes to that discipline, the structure, that end result, the process. It's exciting. It's a great
Yeah.
little reminder, I think, for the listeners, to always, I don't want to say wanting more, because I know you and I spoke about just being after
Yeah.
the after your
Right.
beautiful venture. And I think that's a big thing I sometimes struggle with, to be honest.
Oh, I think I do too. It's my hardest part. I can do all day long. Be is definitely okay. It's okay. I'm being right now. It's okay. I'm being like I have to remind myself like this is the stage of being, and that's fine. Um,
Mm,
so when you're working with clients, what are you typically working through?
I love this question. Because I built a brand in the fitness space from a real big facade for a while, I
Mhm.
realized that that was almost like my pretend self. It was almost like dancing was my negative self. I removed the layers of that. The fitness world was more of a pretend facade of like not really being who I truly was. And then when I stepped into the business world, I realized the authentic self was so powerful to build a brand. So a lot of women and men come to me to build a social media presence around their authentic self, who they truly are when no one's watching, who they are where they think no one's going to love them for that person, when really that can be a brand that they can build. So I look at their story, their themes, their values. And from that, we start putting together storytelling frameworks to really captivate their audience to sell from a un-ick place, because I'm very big on selling every single day. And we put together, you know, the roadmap. I always say it's called Queen Phase of the brand, the business, and the connection piece of their story with that. And that creates the selling point too. And with that, we work on their high ticket offers. We look at their podcasts as well. We look at credibility, how to build them as an expert in their field. And a big message I always remind my clients, because when I was in the fitness space, I was an inspiring, athlete, but I was
Mm-hmm.
also wanting to build my business through that. So for a lot of times, people would come to me and go, "Oh, you inspire me to be on stage." But I wanted to work with people as a fitness coach as well. So branching I guess the connection piece when it comes to content, being an educator, being inspiring, but also being able to be relatable to your consumers, so people then buy into what you are actually offering to them. And that's what I don't know, turns me on.
Yeah, yeah. It gets you excited, wakes you up, right? Like ready to get out of bed and help somebody. Um, when you're helping people go through this, where do people normally get stuck?
Yeah, they really have judgment on how they will be perceived online.
Mm,
Opening parts of their story can be quite, and not everyone has to have a traumatic story. And I think that could be a big thing that a lot of women and men get stuck on. It's like, well, who am I? I haven't gone through being homeless. I haven't, you know, nearly died or anything like that. And I think that's where it gets to be really cool to show them how amazing they are, even if they haven't had these traumatic things. So, yeah, they get stuck on, I guess, the fear of judgment, the fear of failure, and also just, well, who am I when I haven't had this crazy life? And
mm-hmm.
that's kind of where we really support them through that, because I think it's just their own stories that they believe themselves, their limiting beliefs, that that's what they think is going to stop them from selling, but it actually becomes their superpower.
Got it. And what are most people selling? Is it the masterminds nowadays? Is it online coaching? What does it look
I
like?
love this question, because I think 2 years ago it was like master classes, low ticket offers, mid things, whereas now it's a lot of my clients actually want to be in the event space and do retreats and masterminds. So I think that's been a big thing. Maybe you can relate. COVID, I feel like a lot of people did do a more masterminds because they wanted to learn and be around like the proximity of people. Whereas right now, my clients, they focus on 3 tiers. So they're low, the mid, which is their community building, and their high stuff, which is the masterminds, retreats, and events. So
Okay.
yeah,
And
do you
what are
see
they
that as well?
doing? Like, if somebody goes to a mastermind event, like say one that you're
Mm,
hosting, what are you, what happens at those?
yeah, I love that. I think the biggest thing that happens there is that they're not alone. Ooh.
Okay.
And they see the power of proximity. And what happens as well, a lot of unraveling of the internal world, I think, comes up as well. I have a background in life coaching too. So we develop, I don't want to say we integrate, but yeah, I guess we do a lot of like going back to the first event, looking at their childhood, seeing how that's blocked them from building a business, and then transitioning themselves and transforming what's happened in the past to how that they can really remove those blocks to start selling their businesses in a really authentic place. um, I just really miss connecting in person. And I think that's what I really want to focus on next year in these events that you and I were speaking about. Like, we saw the power of just being together in person. It was just amazing. And I think women and men, when they come together in physical form, like proximity, they forget how powerful it can be and how much transformation can happen.
Mm-hmm. No, I believe it. And what have you found a magic number of how many people should attend?
No, I've actually
Okay.
never thought of that. It's funny. I used to get really fixated on, if I don't have this much, oh no. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, I think 15 is good. What do you think?
Okay. Yeah. No, I think it just depends, right? Like, so when I do
Yeah,
things, I'm normally taking people out in nature and we're doing hikes and things like just getting them outside.
yeah, I
Um,
love that.
and so then it's a little more intimate. right? And then
Mm,
sometimes, I really like to vet the group. So if everybody's in a similar space, I feel like the synergy between everybody really helps everybody process through what they're going through. Um, so I found that doing the work on the front end has made the
mm.
work on the back end that much easier.
I'd love to go to one of your events. It sounds beautiful.
Yeah, they're fun. They're fun. I love
Yeah,
it. I love it.
yeah.
Um,
And
and
when
I
you
only
talk
do
about
them
fun
for
stuff,
2 days. Like, so my next one is January 3rd, 4th, and 5th. So it's like 2 nights, 3 days. We rent a house. We're in that space together. And like, it's pretty cool.
whereabouts is it?
I'm going to host this one in Park City, my home base.
Ah, I love that. I still need to
Yeah.
explore the US a lot more. I've been to like Los Angeles. Where else have I been? Vegas, Manhattan Beach. Yeah, I
Yep.
need to venture out more.
Yeah. There's so much. There's so much. And then when you work with people privately as well, not just through the masterminds, right? And do you
Yeah.
take them, like, is it typically a 6 week journey or a 6 month journey, or what's the journey like with you?
Thank you for asking, my love. I do a year and 6 months sometimes because sometimes I get a lot of startups.
Okay.
And it's interesting because people are like, I want the business now. I want the multi
Yeah.
seven figures. I'm like, great.
Great. Yeah. So do we all. Thank you. Great. Good, Kyle.
Yeah. So it's funny though, I am adding a 3 month accelerator because I feel like people sometimes just need like that. I don't want to say quick fix, but they may be stuck at like a sort of revenue goal and they just want to have something that's quick and efficient. So that's another thing I'm adding in for next year. But generally 6 to 12 months. When I used to do life coaching, which I sort of integrate with the business side of things, 12 weeks was a really great number that we found. And then sometimes I've worked with people for a year and it's kind of like they're at that phase where they're like the 6 months sometimes isn't enough, and then the 1 year they're like, well, I can probably now do this on my own or work with another mentor. So it's kind of nice to have like a mix of 3, 6, and 12.
Yeah. No, I like that. Definitely.
Mm.
And then, are you doing men and women?
I actually, yeah, I.
Okay.
It's funny because you look at my brand, it's pink and gold, and I had a man start, and I felt like he's a very conscious masculine, and he was so in tune with himself. He was very, I don't want to say feminine, but he had the balance of masculine and feminine energy, and he understood spirituality. He really was connected with himself, and he worked really well with a group of women. It was actually beautiful, and that's just kind of opened up other opportunities now for me to work with men as well, because I think I have a very masculine approach in business, but sometimes
Mm-hmm.
men work better when the female is a bit more masculine, but they have that feminine quality about them when it comes to business. I don't know if you've
Mm-hmm.
ever worked with men before.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I love being coached by men. I don't know if it's just because of like the dance world, and the fitness side of things. All my coaches were men. I kind of like being told what to do.
I do too. I agree. And I have a natural masculine energy too. So like having somebody more masculine allows me to drop into my feminine a little bit easier than if I have somebody in the feminine, then it like almost keeps me in my masculine more. But that's
Yeah.
just my pattern. So how do you work on yourself? Like I know like as a coach to
Mm.
others and helping, how are you checking yourself and making sure that you're evolving?
Yeah, I love that question because I'm very big on the embodiment. I really want to make sure anything I give my clients to work on, I'm doing the work myself. Obviously, throughout my comp days, I did a lot of neurolinguistic programming. I worked with a lot of healers, energetic works. I went through a bit of a phase with spiritual coaches too. And I'm kind of now coming back to therapy at this time at this time of my life. Obviously what I was sharing with you before, there's a lot of unresolved stuff with my dad that I have yet to still work on. And I think that's been a big thing when we're talking about masculine and feminine energy. I think there's a bit of work there that I'm navigating through right now. So yeah, I've been working on myself with a therapist. And I think after that, I'm open to seeing other ways of healing, and I think that's the most important thing, the evolvement. And when you're peeling the layers, it's almost like the next phase of your healing journey gets to be new things that you get to unpack when you didn't really realize it was there, which I'm sure you can relate
Yeah.
with. So
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I do a lot of mindset work myself. You know, I'm big on routine with meditation, breath work, movement, and journaling. Like that's like the surface level stuff. Let's well, I wouldn't say surface level, but they're the basics that I love to do on a daily basis.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what is your, like, do you have a morning routine or a nighttime routine that you employ to keep yourself starting the day right?
Yeah, I
What does
do. I
that look
do.
like?
Yeah, and it's funny. I was really big on the 4 a.m. start and the 5 a.m. start until we met Dr. Bruce. I'm like, oh, my chronotype is a dolphin. I need to probably wake up at 6. But I wake up every morning. I have a coffee. I set my intentions. That's a big thing in my journal. I've got prompts there, and that changes the game for me because it's interesting for me. I never used to set intentions. I used to do my gratitudes. You know, what will make today great. But the intention for me has been really, really huge. I listen to a meditation depending on what the goal is, you know, whether it's, you know, focusing on sales or whether it's focusing on being more of a CEO or maybe focusing on creativity. I always find different meditations that sort of sets the tone of the day. And once I've done that, I always go for a big walk because I live quite close to the beach here.
Oh,
And
nice.
I find when I do that, ideas come. I don't know if you've done that before, Jen. Like you're like, oh, what am I doing today? What's my content game like? You know, who do I need to be? I go for a walk and then everything comes out. I'm like, whoa, all right, come back home, start writing things down.
Yes. Yes.
So yeah,
Yes.
and my night routine, I also then do a bit of journaling. You know, what were the wins, and then what will make tomorrow great. And Jordan and I, you've met him, my partner. We speak to the universe at night. Sounds really dorky.
No, I like this. Share, share, share.
Yeah, and it's funny because like when we first started dating, you know, a bit of backstory, guys. It was a one night stand, and then we basically never left each other's side after that. And he was really into his spirituality a bit when with connecting to the universe. So we just started always just speaking, like it was almost like prayer. But we always use languages like declare and commit and demand, and you know, thanking the universe, and you know, talking about like what we learned that day. You know, what our gratitudes were. And I have found doing this at night with him makes such a huge difference for the next day. So yeah,
Really? I like
yeah.
that they're using those power words too, like demand and all that versus passive, right? Like I think the more convicted we are in what we're desiring, the more that can echo back to us.
Completely. It's funny because I think about my mum is religious and I grew up religious, and I think about how I used to speak to the universe or God then versus now. I think it was almost like hope, whereas now there's like the tonality and the strength behind the words. Huge shift.
Yeah.
Huge
Like
shift.
I will
Yeah.
create X or I will do this. And that just the whole intention, the whole energy, the whole everything comes through and how you deliver and how you receive.
Gosh, that receiving thing, I think you and I spoke about on our podcast, is massive because you can ask for the things you want, but do you believe you deserve it? Or do you give yourself permission to receive? And that's been a big journey, I think, since stepping into the personal development space, allowing myself to see what comes and surrendering. So, yeah, I really resonate with
Yeah. How do you help clients let go of things?
that.
Because I think that's where I get stuck. If I'm going to get stuck somewhere, as I am a collector and do not let go.
That's tough, babe. It's such a good question. So, I have this thing where if they're feeling a certain thing and they can't get out of it, I always think it's about acknowledging it. So, you know, saying to the universe or speaking out loud, thank you for bringing this awareness of this unresourceful state. I'm going to park it right now and come back to it. And I always get them to do something where they're either dancing to their favorite song or they get to go out for a walk. And sometimes I even get them to sort of process it if there is something there for them to really navigate through. Because if there's something that they're not letting go, there's obviously something there for them to bring forward. And so it's more about acknowledging it, but also then going, please let me know what the signs are of this thing that I need to work on. And I think that's a beautiful thing too, because maybe a lot of women and men listening, and even myself, I used to just suppress things and then it would come out later. And so sometimes I think rather than letting it go, it's an opportunity for them to then see, well, what's here right now? What is something that I need to go through with this moment? Is it, do I need to journal about it? Do I need to express it in a form of like exercise? Do I need to verbalize it? Do I need to get out of my body? Yeah, and I think that's what we like to do. Thinking about it now, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah. I
tough
just think
one,
it's
babe.
interesting.
What do you
Yeah.
do?
I do all kinds of things, right? Like I have a tendency to ruminate on something. So then I'll just recycle it
Mm,
in my head over and over and over. And that
yeah,
helps zero.
yeah.
So I set myself time limits where
Ooh,
if something's bothering me, I'll let myself unload and I'll do like a grump dump per se
yep.
for five
I love that.
minutes. And I can say as many negative, horrible, whatever things I want to. And then for 5 minutes. And when that 5 minutes is up, like I'm not allowed to do it again for another hour. And so then it keeps me from destroying a whole day, right? Like because
Mm,
I can layer it on, wear it all day long, live in it, and that's not helping anybody, right? That's the past affecting the future. And so
yeah,
I give myself time limits on how much I'm allowed to dump. And then I also like do remind myself like I'm creating my future. I need to look
mm,
forward with what I want to create and let go of what was in my past and be okay with whatever's not here anymore. And it's, it's easier said than done, right? Like I have a
yeah,
friendship that broke up recently and you kind of look at it and you're like, okay, well, probably should have broken up long before it did. Um,
yeah,
so then you kind of get mad at yourself for holding on as long as you
yeah,
did, right? You're like,
yeah.
why didn't I let it go when I should have? There's just like so many emotions that you cycle through. It's kind of like that grief process. You're sad, you're angry, you're mad, you're grateful it's done, you're sad, you're angry, you're like all those things.
That would have been amazing. Like breaking up with a friend. Wow. Yeah. Recently
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah. It's hard, right? I mean, it's just something I had to do. And
Mm,
it's been interesting because I've been more aware of how I'm processing it so that I can be
mm,
more aware of how to help somebody else through it instead of like just muscling through it. I'm like, okay, well, what are all the ways that I can handle this and still have a good day?
yeah. Yeah. I love that because it's a matter of being aware of how you're feeling, but still being able to show up as your authentic self and still be able to support other people and yourself in those moments. So
Right, right. Like it's like, hey, guess what? Show goes on. 7 kids still need to get to school, need to be fed, like all the pieces. And so just learning to give space to all of it and then understanding that that's part of the journey and what I'm learning allows me to help somebody else.
mm, I love the timestamp that you do in the what was it? The dump? What was it? The
Yeah, I call it a grump dump, like,
I love
grumpy.
that.
Because I think so much we focus on gratitude. And I do
Yeah.
think gratitude's important. But like you said, if we do not get that grump out of us, then it just
Mm,
accumulates, right? And then it leaks out sideways and we say something or we snap or we just have inappropriate responses for other things because we haven't let the one thing out of our system.
I love that you bring this up. I literally had something happen over the weekend where I'm working on not reacting and just like, working on, haven't quite got there. And there was something that happened between a friend and I, and naturally the spicy Brazilian comes out and wants to address. I'm very good at confrontation, but it's the delivery that I have when it comes to the confrontation. So I sat with it for a bit and I didn't want to let it go because I was very close to like, you know what, I'll just let it go. I'll leave it. And I actually ended up speaking my truth. And it ended up being from a place of like, this is how I'm feeling. I've gone over and reflected on what happened. And the way I approached it that way versus the way I normally do it was so much more, I don't know, I want to say healthier because I
Yeah,
didn't
centered, right? Like so
project.
much more like, yeah, right, right. You're responding instead of reacting.
Yeah.
Which is something
Yeah.
I always remind myself. I'm like, am I reacting or am I responding? Am I reacting? Am I responding? And so, and what is my end game?
Seriously.
What's my end game? But yeah, so
Yeah.
it's been interesting. Um, okay, so you're in Australia, but you still work with everybody in the States, and you actually come over here more frequently than what maybe one would think. So tell my audience how we connect with you, what things we can do to support your business.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Please jump on my Instagram, Tamara, my coach. I have a podcast called Keys to the Queendom. Jen's episode is dropping next week, which I'm excited about. And yeah, I have 3 awesome programs. One's called Queen Stream, which is an 8-week university to help, the aspiring business owners build their multi 6-figure business. Empire is an amazing community where I get a lot of guest speakers on there. It's a group coaching community as well. So a lot of the foundations of business are in Empire. And then Queendom's my mastermind. So if you want to work with me exclusively one-on-one, if you can handle this crazy Brazilian, German, Australian accent, yeah, that's how you get to work with me. And my YouTube as well. You and I are speaking about YouTube, by the way. Follow my YouTube too.
I love
That's
it. Perfect, perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing all your wisdom and authenticity. It's refreshing.
No, thank you, beautiful girl. And likewise, I can't wait to actually visit you again. It's going to happen.